So Tuesday was the day of the big protests held by several influential labor unions in Iowa down at the Iowa State House. Now, if you're a longtime listener to my radio show or reader of my blogs and columns, you know that unlike a lot of other arch right-wingers, I've got a bit of a soft spot for unions. I grew up in a union household. I used to belong to the Teamsters Union back in the day when I worked at UPS. I do think unions have, at times, in their history, served a constructive role in American economics. I think one of the reasons that we haven't flirted with socialism and communism, particularly in eras like the 20s, 30s, and the 40s, that a lot of our European neighbors did and other countries in the world did, is because we came up with an invention that maybe a Karl Marx did not foresee, and that was collective bargaining, the idea that workers could organize into a force that would allow them to compete on the economic stage with the corporate robber barons. And so I do think that the concept of unions overall have been good for America, because I don't really trust human nature on any level, and I don't trust big business any more often than I tend to trust big government. But with that said, like most well-intentioned movements, and we've certainly chronicled this on the right over the years, like most originally well-intentioned movements, I should say, things have a tendency to go haywire after a while, especially when the seat at the table is available and a lot of money exchanges hands. And that's what's happened to unions in recent years, particularly since Ronald Reagan left office. Instead of seeing themselves primarily as a force for helping the American worker protect himself from injury on the job, have a wage that he can feed his family with, access to health insurance that should his children get sick, and maybe a few pennies left over should his children want to go to college or get a first house or get married after they're grown, they now view themselves primarily as a political entity. And they no longer are so much concerned with the rights of workers as they are furthering the political ambitions of those they're politically aligned with. Case in point, let's take a look at this rally that was held on Tuesday. Now, Monday, if I recall, as I looked at my calendar, Monday was a holiday. It was President's Day. That also meant with a lot of government entities shut down, it was a slow news day. If the unions really wanted to make a statement, take a day that all of their workers, especially if they're state workers, already had off, take that day, maximize your media exposure, which would be a slow news day with it being a federal holiday, and you would have actually gotten the most exposure to your cause. Is that what they did, however? No. Instead, what they did is they took the paid holiday off, and then they took another day off on Tuesday to hold their mass demonstrations. Now, listen, I'm not, the sharpest knife in the drawer, but one thing I've learned as an employee myself is don't ever let your customers and your employer come up with the idea that you're really not that needed, that they can do everything that you can do for them without you there. That's usually not conducive to your long-term viability as an employee. So I ask you, did you miss them while they were not at work on Tuesday? Did the state shut down? Did you not get something you were supposed to get? Did your life demonstrably change for the worse because 21, according to some estimates, 21 buses of union laborers showed up to rally at the State House instead of to do their jobs like the rest of us who don't work for a labor union that is organized for political purposes. The rest of us had to go to work. So did you miss all these people that showed up to demonstrate on Tuesday? No, you didn't. And see, these are things I don't understand. Explain to me how you advance the cause of the American working class by proving that all those people that showed up at the State House aren't really needed, that they're not really necessary, that their jobs could be filled by somebody else. Again, this is what happens when you're worried primarily about a political message and not the cause. Now, if I were Governor Terry Branstad, here's how I would have responded to this today. I would have rolled right out of Terrace Hill. I'd have showed up there with my own media entourage, and I would have fired every one of those state employees that was there today. Every single one of them that thought that they had something better to do than their jobs. And then I would have said, it's obvious you guys aren't really all that needed. because state government's getting by just fine today without you. So maybe we'll hire some people around here that would actually like to work and not demonstrate. Because the last I checked, there's a lot of people looking for jobs in Iowa who I'm sure would be more than happy to fill those jobs, whether they voted for Terry Branstad or not, simply because they vote for feeding their family. And they don't have time for political rallies and to further the political ambitions of their union bosses because they need a job to keep food on the table and a roof over their heads. The union bosses, in my opinion, did a great disservice to the very people they're trying to represent. At some point in any movement, whether it's labor, whether it's the life movement, whether it's the movement to reform the tax code in the IRS, to shrink government, to bring back the founding fathers and their ideals, every movement eventually has to make a decision. Is it about personalities or is it about issues? Are we people of positions or are we people of convictions? And it's unfortunately clear, especially to somebody like me who grew up in a working class home and saw the benefits that unions can have for working families and has a soft spot in his heart for the swing the hammer guy that used to represent what labor unions were about in America. It's a sad, tragic thing to finally admit once and for all that those days are come and gone. That the union bosses, they have made their decisions. It isn't about anything else anymore except furthering their own ambitions and their own political connections. And the demonstrations that took place on a day when all of those people should have been working and not practicing politics proves that here in Iowa once and for all.